Lambda is to gay rights what the NAACP is to African Americans, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, what the ACLU is for those who care about civil liberties. Why would the premier gay legal organization insist that our bill, the first in the country to give full equality to gay couples, be withdrawn? Well, Paul confided in me that it's because they didn't write it. The NIH problem, the not invented here problem. How could Lambda Legal Defense Fund raise all this money from gay people and people who support gay rights all across the country? They are the premier leaders. They are the people defending gay rights. How could they advertise if two gay lawyers in Los Angeles could write a bill without needing Lambda's help? They insisted that Paul Koretz withdraw the legislation and instead replace it with one that Lambda had written. One that gave 6 legal rights to gay people. I think hospital visitation was one of them. 6. Ours conferred more than 2,000. 1,000 at the state level, 1,000 at the federal level. Theirs conferred 6. I was very upset. I remember calling Jenny Pfizer with the Lambda Legal Defense Fund and asking her what the heck was her problem. And she said, well, I just don't think America's ready. I don't think California's ready. I said, look, I don't care whether they're ready or not. Ready or not, here we come. Let's start with full marriage equality. And if that gives us 45% of the legislative votes, and to get that extra 5%, we have to cut back some, we'll cut back then. But you don't start by saying we have no right to equality and give us 6 rights, please. You start by saying we are full and equal citizens of the United States. We deserve full equality under the law. And then if we have to cut back on full equality to get the law passed, fine. She said, sorry, no can do. I said, look, Jenny, I know what's going on here. I know Lambda wants credit. So I'll make you a deal. All right? You can put it forward as Lambda's bill. You can endorse our bill. You can even call it the Lambda bill. Just put on that Jim and I wrote it along with Lambda, even though we both know you didn't write any of it. Put it down as a Lambda bill. We can all support it together. Let's all be on the same side here. And she said no. Went back to Paul. He said, you know, Lambda was a big supporter of his. Their imprimatur matters. They're the ones who say to gay people who they should vote for. He represents West Hollywood, which has a high gay population. And if Lambda isn't supporting him, he might not win his next election. Boy, did I learn a hard truth that day. I learned that organizations that purport to support things often are more concerned about their own organizations than they are about the people they care about supporting. To this day, I have never given a penny to Lambda Legal Defense Fund, and I urge you not to give a penny to Lambda Legal Defense Fund ever. Because of this, I realize that there are some people that have changed. Jenny Pfizer, I believe, is still there. And I realize that they support full marriage equality now. I get it. But the fact that they were willing to put their organization above gay people's lives tells me something about that organization. And I got to say, this, I don't mean to only pick on them. I've heard this about organizations that support all kinds of progressive and conservative causes. I don't have personal experience with those other ones, so I can't name them by name. But I can't tell you how many stories I've heard of hearsay. This organization claims to support X, the environment, civil rights, unions, but they care more about their organization and raising money than they do about the actual cause. And when Lambda said, screw gay people of California, we don't give a damn about gay equality. We care more about our organization being seen as in the forefront of gay equality than actually helping gay people. It was a shocker to me. It really was. Poor Paul Koretz. I don't blame him. I don't blame him at all. So, after introducing the bill, he pulled it. He put in the Lambda approved and written bill. Gay people in California got 6 rights. I think it included hospital visitation, rather than striving for full marriage equality. And I say this story just so you see how far we've come. In 13 years, we've come from even a gay rights organization not willing to support a full civil unions bill to the majority of Americans nationwide supporting full marriage equality. Actually, I'm proud to say that the four of us, LJ, Bruce, Lisa, and me, were very clear that we wanted to call our organization Marriage Equality, not gay marriage. Please, no one, progressive, don't use the term gay marriage. There's no such thing as a gay marriage. It's a marriage. It may be a gay couple. It's a marriage. Gay marriages aren't any different from straight marriages. It's just that gay people are in the marriage. You know, when slaves were first given permission to marry, they called them slave marriages. Not marriages or marriages of slaves or marriages of African Americans, but slave marriages, as if to suggest they weren't real marriages. They weren't normal marriages. They were slave marriages. When blacks and whites tried to get married in the 1960s, and it was illegal, they called it miscegenation, which means race mixing. They didn't call it, by its proper term, marriage. Were Barack Obama's parents in a miscegenation, or were they in a marriage? Gay couples do not want to get gay married. They want to get married, just like straight couples do. So I understand, maybe you haven't heard the term. The proper term is marriage equality. Please use that term. It's about equality of marriage under the law. It ain't about gay married. Because gay married aren't gay married any more than black people are black married, or white and black couples are miscegenation, or older people are elderly married. They're all marriages. They all have the rights to equality under the law. So how did we get from 2000, where even gay rights organizations won't support full equality civil unions, to 2013, where the United States Supreme Court recognizes the will of the majority of Americans across the nation who support full marriage equality for all gay citizens? That story when we come back. If you want to call in, it's 202-889-9797. 202-889-9797. This is Mark Levine. This is The Inside Scoop. Follow me on Twitter at Mark Levine Talk. Check out my website at marklevinetalk.com, where you'll see I go on national TV and international TV and talk about some of these issues. Or just tweet at me. Let me know what your thoughts are on this show. You can also comment on my website, marklevinetalk.com. We'll be right back with more of The Inside Scoop right after this.
Listening to WPWC We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com. Take Action News with David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Well, for me, it's always been, you report the facts. You report like hell, let the chips fall where they may. And the truth ultimately is what's going to sort of help our society and help all of us. I don't think progressives want a thumb on the scale on the facts. They just want the facts out there. You let the facts out, and progressives will tell you, we're going to win 70% of the time. You may quibble with the percentages or whatnot, but I think that's just sort of what progressives are looking for, and I think that's where this all sort of meshes with my interest as a journalist. My interest as a journalist is report the facts. Here's what's going on. Here's what the facts say. Here's what history says. Here are the lessons we know we have learned. And let people draw their own conclusions. And I think what's so unfortunate right now in the world of broadcast media is I do think that a lot of conservative radio, certainly conservative television, they're not interested in facts. And that's ultimately where I think conservative media is going to have its downfalls. That Americans are hungry They're just hungry for basic information, hungry for basic facts. You report like hell, you let the chips fall where they may. I think it's natural for all of us who care, who are passionate about politics, who feel like we have a sense about the difference between right and wrong. I think it's okay to let that be part of your coverage. It's important for all of us as broadcasters and journalists. In this day and age, we have to be authentic. You can't be the person who's up in the ivory tower that comes down and tells people, now you must eat your peas. No, it's all about, we all have personalities, and I think it's being aware sometimes of our own bias, but also being open to the idea that sometimes we're wrong, but we have a dialogue, and we have a passionate dialogue, and we care about this country, we care about this community, and I think that sort of passion is what carries us through.
Hear more from David Schuster, Saturdays from 12 to 3 on Take Action News on We Act Radio, 1480 AM, and weactradio.com.
Hello, this is Julia Louis-Dreyfus, and I want to tell you about my new favorite discovery, Yosemite National Park. I recently went there with my husband and children, and we walked the trails to see the breathtaking waterfalls, admired the grand meadows and giant sequoias. But the future of our national parks is uncertain. Many challenges face our parks today, from polluted air and water to development threats outside their borders and inadequate funding to protect our national heritage. That's why the National Parks Conservation Association recently completed a decade-long assessment of the challenges facing our national parks, along with proposed actions that will ensure our children and grandchildren will be able to enjoy the parks as we have. Our national parks have inspired Americans for nearly 100 years. As we approach the centennial of the National Park Service in 2016, please join us in helping to protect our national park legacy. Find out how at www.npca.org.
You're listening to WPWC, We Act Radio, 1480 AM, weactradio.com.
Welcome back to the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Mark Levine. So, in 2000, I was not the happiest Californian. We just lost Proposition 22, 62 to 38. They had the people of California had voted against gay rights, and of course the campaign, I wasn't even that happy with the gay community, because the people who opposed the Night Initiative, as I didn't want to show the reality of gay people's lives. I disagree with them on that. And then I drafted California's first civil unions bill, and it was thrown out because a gay rights organization hadn't invented it themselves. So I wish I could say that that was the cause of me leaving California in a huff. The reality is, of course, I care about a lot more than gay rights, as you know, if you listen to the Inside Scoop every week from 1 to 3 at marklevinetalk.com and on We Act Radio, AM 1480. And I got actively involved in following Bush v. Gore. That's a story for another day. It's a long story. Many of you have heard it before. But basically, I followed it from all the time that I called in the Buchanan spike in Palm Beach, Florida to CNN that election night, to calling the Gore campaign, asking him not to concede, to following all the legal action and then writing about it after the Supreme Court came in. I'm not claiming I'm the only one who caught the Buchanan spike or the only one who told Gore not to concede. There were thousands of us who did so, but that was my tiny role in that. And then, of course, after I wrote an email called the Layman's Guide to Bush v. Gore about how the Supreme Court had stolen the election of 2000, I was hired by the Congressional Black Caucus to draft the brief challenging the Florida electors, and I was hired by Congressman Barney Frank to work for him on the House Judiciary Committee, Homeland Security Committee, Financial Services Committee, and I came and I moved to Washington. So I left California, and I left the marriage equality debate for a while. But of course, working for Barney Frank, openly gay congressman, the issue of gay rights was never too far from the consciousness. And soon after came the dramatic 2003 Lawrence v. Texas decision, when Justice Kennedy joined with the four liberals and I believe Justice Sandra Day O'Connor at that time in saying, guess what? You can't throw people in jail for having oral sex, private consenting adults. If a married couple wants to have oral sex, you know what? Leave them alone. This is America. We don't throw people in jail because we don't like the way they have sex. If we did, I think we could throw millions of people in jail. Big case. And as Justice Scalia pointed out in the dissent to that case, if you treat gay couples having sex the same as straight couples having sex, sooner or later, you're going to have to pretend that gay people have all the rights that straight people have, including the right to get married. And he said that as a parade of horribles, as a slippery slope. Don't throw gay people in jail, and the next thing you know, they're going to want the same right to marry that straight people have. Scalia was right. And indeed, the finding of Lawrence v. Texas would eventually lead to the finding just Wednesday that the Defense of Marriage Act is unconstitutional. So Lawrence v. Texas happened. That was exciting. It was now legal for people to have oral sex in my home state of Virginia. Before then, it was illegal. And then came the big case, the Goodridge case. Massachusetts Supreme Court said that gay couples there would have full and equal rights to marry. First state in the United States. It wasn't the first place in the world. Some Scandinavian countries and the Netherlands have been giving civil unions and domestic partnerships and limited rights to gay couples dating back to 1989. And by 2000, the Netherlands, and I believe Belgium too, became the first countries in the world to have full marriage equality. I got a caller on the line. Let's take the call. Let's see if it... Hi there. Welcome to the Inside Scoop.
Hey, Mark. Michael.
Hello again.
Hello.
I didn't get a chance to talk about other topics. I will next week. I know you want to talk about Trayvon Martin and some other things, but I was just concluding my story about marriage equality. So if it's on that topic, go right ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to ask you to save it for next week.
Yeah, no, I know we'll talk about that other stuff next week, but as far as just what you were pointing out, that Texas case that you pointed out.
Lawrence v. Texas.
Yeah, you are a doggone genius. You know why?
Why?
Because you have exposed further the hypocrisy of the right-wingers. It is so, I am so beside myself that they will worry about how people spend private, intimate moments with each other. And notice how I'm using that term strongly but broadly.
Yeah.
Because we don't need to go into any specifics.
No, but they want to spy on us in our bedrooms. That's exactly what they want to do. They want to spy on us in our bedrooms. And if there's no violence being committed, if it's all consensual, it's between adults, leave us alone.
It goes much more than that.
All right.
They want to spy in our bedrooms, which is a violation of right to privacy.
That's true.
But yet, they don't want to touch base upon people like Mark Sanford, people like Rudy Giuliani, who engage in extramarital affairs and doing so at the expense of taxpayers' dollars.
Well, I want to be clear about that. If it's at the expense of taxpayer dollars, then I do think we have a right to know. For example, if somebody uses taxpayer money to pay off their mistress, which, by the way, Alexander Hamilton did that way back 200-some years ago, so this is nothing new. But to the extent that a politician is involved in an extramarital affair that doesn't involve taxpayer money, Bill Clinton, for example, I think that's a private matter between a married couple.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize that. That indeed was a private matter. It did not involve taxpayers' dollars.
Right, exactly.
But then when you had somebody like Sanford, when you have somebody like Giuliani going on these weekend or vacation liaisons with their mistresses and using taxpaying dollars to pay for the cost of lodgings or whatever, for whatever the devil that they did, you cannot do that. That is against the law. That is a crime. And to this very day, not one of them, because they're Republican, have ever been held accountable when they should have. Yeah,
Senator David Vitter of Louisiana, who admitted to seeing prostitutes, which is, of course, against the law, in Louisiana. Now, of course, Eliot Spitzer, governor of New York, he did not use taxpayer money. He did see prostitutes, and he resigned. But David Vitter remains a senator in Louisiana today. So you're absolutely right.
He was forced to resign.
Yeah, there's a double standard. Well, he was forced to, but no one forced David Vitter to resign.
Right.
He's still in Congress today. Okay, I want to just finish up. I only got 10 minutes left, so
I just had to call back.
Fair
and
enough.
Let you know of that.
Okay, thanks for calling, Michael. I always appreciate when you do. All right, so just to finish the story, because I do want to do that in just the 10 minutes or so I have left. Massachusetts passes the first. Excuse me, I should say the Massachusetts Supreme Court says that under the Massachusetts Constitution, gay couples have the same equal rights to marry that straight couples do. Again, there's a huge backlash. There's a huge election in 2004. It's very close between Bush and Kerry. If a few votes in Ohio had been switched, Kerry would have been the president in 2004. And one of the big things that Republicans pushed in 2004 is all these anti-gay marriage constitutional amendments and ballot measures, because they feel like the majority of Americans oppose full marriage equality, which they did in 2004, and they're going to get out a lot of votes. They're going to get out all these socially conservative votes. George Bush even supports an amendment to the federal Constitution, the first amendment in American history that would restrict freedoms rather than expand them. You know, every other amendment to the Constitution expanded human freedoms. The Bill of Rights expands human freedoms. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments that allowed African Americans to be full citizens, to ban slavery, to vote, expanded human freedoms. The right of women to vote expanded human freedoms. The right of 18-year-olds to vote in 1971, giving electoral votes to District of Columbia, whatever it is, every single other amendment to the Constitution expanded human freedoms, expanded the right to vote. This would contract it. This would put inequality permanently in our federal Constitution. And they almost had the votes to pass it. Luckily, it required a two-thirds vote in both houses. Didn't quite get that. And in Massachusetts, luckily, it's hard to change that Constitution as well. People tried to change the Massachusetts Constitution, and they didn't get enough votes to do that. So everyone was ready. Okay, Massachusetts allows gay couples. And everyone was waiting, at least the social conservatives, for Massachusetts families to disintegrate, for people to stop getting married, straight people too. And lo and behold, ho-hum, Massachusetts couples got married. Roofs didn't cave in. God didn't strike down Massachusetts with hurricanes. Straight couples continued to get married and divorced. Gay couples too. They all raised children. Pretty normal. Pretty normal. And so 4 years later, Connecticut in 2008 became the second state, and then, well, they just started going one right after the other. Vermont switched from civil unions to marriage. We had New Hampshire. We had Iowa's court held that, and then Maryland, and I was very proud of working on the District of Columbia's marriage equality statute. In fact, once we passed it in the D.C. legislature, the D.C. City Council, District of Columbia, the people who opposed it actually tried to bring it to a referendum to vote on. And I said, you can't do it in D.C. because D.C. had a human rights statute, dates back to the 70s, that says you cannot discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. And more importantly, you can't vote on whether or not to discriminate. You can vote on all kinds of things. You can vote on tax issues. You can vote on the lottery. You can vote on schools, parks. Bring that to the people if you want, to direct democracy. But you cannot have a vote on minority rights. The majority should never vote on minority rights. If there's anything we learned from the civil rights movement, when the majority of Alabamans and Mississippians voted to deny African Americans equal rights under the law, a majority should never vote on minority rights. Equality is non-negotiable. You can't say, oh, well, 70% of Mississippi is white and 30% is black, and so 70% of whites are going to determine that the 30% have no rights. You just can't do that. And I went to court, I'm proud to say, as counsel for the Gertrude Stein Democratic Club, the longest gay Democratic club in the United States, longest serving, or the first, or maybe the second. Anyway, I went to court. Later on, I had the same trouble with gay rights organizations I did in California. They said, you can't, individual lawyer, go to court to defend this very important case. And we need something big, like some big gay rights organization with lots of money to come in and lots of lawyers. And they went in and basically defended what I had already done. But the point is, I went and I did the groundwork. And I defended it in court. And I worked with Phil Mendelson, who's a wonderful city councilman who I hope one day is mayor of the District of Columbia, mayor of Washington, D.C. He worked with me. We worked very hard to protect religious freedoms because no one wants to require synagogues and churches and mosques to marry anyone they don't want to marry. I believe in full religious freedom under the First Amendment. Heck, a church can even be racist. I won't like that church, But if they want to only marry whites or blacks, or the Catholic Church doesn't want to marry Catholics and Protestants or whatever, that's fine. Religions have the right to marry whomever they want. I don't care what religions do to the people who are in their religions, because people can enter or leave religions. But the state has to be equal to all. I worked with Phil Mendelson, drafting that legislation, making it into law, advocating for it. You can still see my testimony on behalf of the marriage equality bill. That's online on my website, marklevinetalk.com, and then defending it in court. And I'm proud to say we won it in D.C. and Maryland, and then in New York, and Rhode Island, Minnesota, Washington State. Maine changed its mind a couple times. And there are 12 states, and then, of course, with the end of Proposition 8, California became Wednesday the 13th state. Now 30% of Americans live in states that allow full equality for gay couples. What happened in the Proposition 8 case? Well, like the defense of marriage case, basically times have changed. Californians sued and said, so what happened in 2008? There was yet another proposition, not like Proposition 22, that said that gay couples could not marry. And Proposition 8, and I wasn't involved in that campaign. I wasn't living in California at the time. I sent them a bunch of money to the anti-Prop 8 campaign. But to their credit, they at least began using, in some ads, showing real gay couples, real gay lives. And although we lost Proposition 8 in 2008, we lost it by 52 to 48. Remember, we lost Prop 22 8 years earlier, 62 to 38. That means that 10% of Californians changed their mind in just 8 years. Maybe because they saw in Massachusetts, no harm, no foul to allow gay couples to marry. But we still lost, and Californians were very bitter and upset. And they took it up to the California Supreme Court. The California Supreme Court said, hey, you know, gay couples have a right to marry. That Proposition 8 was a constitutional amendment to overturn the California Supreme Court decision. So then they took it up under the federal Constitution and said, you know what? The 14th Amendment of the Constitution right here says that every state has to give their citizens equal protection under the laws. And a federal district court judge in California said, you know what? You're right. You're right. Not allowing gay couples full equality is a violation of the federal Constitution. David Boies and Ted Olson took it all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. The United States Supreme Court took the case, but by the time they took the case, California officials weren't ready to even defend their own law. The governor of California, the attorney general of California, two great men who said, you know what, this is unconstitutional. We don't believe in discrimination. We're not going to defend this law. So the Supreme Court saw an out. They said, well, if Californians don't support this law, then I'll fine. We won't take it. The lower court holds it's unconstitutional. And by doing so, they very carefully said that California has marriage equality, but not the 37 states that don't have it yet. It's my prediction that that will happen. There will be full marriage equality throughout the United States within another 10 years, probably sooner. And I base that on the fact that in 1948, California was the first state to say that interracial marriage bans were unconstitutional. And 19 years later, in Loving v. Virginia in 1967, they said, all right, that means that no state can ban interracial marriages. I take those 19 years, I add them to the Massachusetts case in 2004, and I say by 2023, 10 years from today, there will be full marriage equality across the United States. 10 years ago was the first state. 10 years from now will be the last state. I'm proud of the small role that I played in the process, and I hope I've given a little bit of encouragement to all of you fighting for whatever goals you believe in, whether it be environments or reinstituting the Voting Rights Act, whether it being for unions or fair wages, whatever your cause. Never doubt, as Margaret Mead once said, never doubt that a small group of committed activists can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Well, that's the inside scoop I have on both what I did and what happened in the United States Supreme Court. If you have a comment, go to my website, marklevinetalk.com, and feel free to leave the comments there. Follow me on Twitter at marklevinetalk, and listen to me every Sunday, Raucous Caucus, noon to 1, and the Inside Scoop, 1 to 3 Eastern Time. For now, though, this is Mark Levine, and I'm signing off.
listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. More than 1,000 Las Vegas taxi drivers are entering their fourth week on strike against the Yellow Checker Star Cab Company after the company imposed a labor contract rejected by 70% of the drivers. Compensation and hours worked are major issues. Sam Moffat is a chief union steward with the Taxi Drivers Union, ITPEU Local 4873. He says compensation is the same now as it was in 2008, 39% of the meter plus tips. Drivers often have to work 12-hour shifts and pay $55 a week, plus about $3.60 a day deducted from their fares for health care. Moffat says that many of these striking Las Vegas drivers are immigrants chasing the American dream. But while the strike is on, they're urging Vegas tourists to not take Yellow Checker Star cabs.
People that came over here with the great American dream, as what our fathers and our forefathers did the same thing. And all we expect, all the cab drivers want, is a fair contract. We're not asking for the world. We don't expect the world. But we expect to be treated fairly and be treated as humans. And not only Yellow Checker Star, but every cab company in Las Vegas is guilty of the same thing. And this needs to be resolved. It needs to be changed.
The forced federal furloughs brought on by the sequester cuts will significantly impact younger workers and their families. Jesse Russell reports.
Last week, rallies calling on Congress to fix the sequester cuts were held throughout the country. Howard Eagerman is a Social Security worker, and he's also American Federation of Government Employees Local 3172 Vice President. He attended a rally in East Oakland, California. He said one of the primary concerns is how unpaid furloughs will impact new hires.
The people who may be first to go are the newest employees, the temporary hires, who are primarily disabled individuals, Peace Corps volunteers, and what concerns me most, veterans, because I started as a veteran 40 years ago.
Eagerman said the 20% pay cut that will result from the furloughs will overwhelmingly hinder younger workers from being able to pay their bills and get ahead.
I have worries about our younger people not being able to pay their rent, not being able to pay their car note. And for instance, one of my colleagues has something like $100,000 in college loans. I'm concerned about the young folks. That is my major concern.
Workers Independent News puts workers and their unions on the national radio news airwaves every day. To help keep labor's voice on the air, go to laborradio.org.
Workers Independent News made possible in part through underwriting support from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
If you served honorably in our nation's armed forces and you're looking for a way to continue serving your fellow veterans in your community, then join AMVETS. Each year, AMVETS members volunteer millions of hours at VA healthcare facilities from coast to coast, helping to improve the lives of their fellow veterans through the VA Voluntary Services Program. AMVETS posts and departments also participate in a wide variety of community service projects, ranging from Americanism in our schools to supporting the Special Olympics and Boy Scouts of America. If you no longer wear the uniform today, you can still serve through the AMVETS by joining today at amvets.org.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Hello, America, and welcome to Pivot Point, a show bringing you diverse views on the news. I'm your host, Maya Rockeymoore. Well, it was all about the Supreme Court this week. Many controversial decisions that were made. Certainly the Voting Rights Act of 1965, that was a major decision, and it will have broad-ranging implications for the American electorate, especially those who are in those 15 southern states that have been released from the pre-clearance requirement of the original Voting Rights Act. And so it'll be interesting to see how this decision actually affects democracy, and will it represent a step back for the civil rights movement in this nation, and for democratic rights of citizens everywhere. And of course, the big news in terms of the Supreme Court was the Defense of Marriage Act. By a surprising 5-4 vote, the Supreme Court actually struck down the DOMA, the Defense of Marriage Act. And later in the show, we will actually talk to Lori Young, who is the Aging and Economic Security Director for the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. Lori is actually recently retired, so we'll also ask her how it feels to be retired. We'll also talk about student loan rates. The student loan rates are expected to double after the failure of the Senate to actually pass a bill to keep the rates low for students. And Monday is the day, D-Day, if you will, that the rates are expected to double. We will talk to Emily Crockett. She is the editor of Campus Progress. She'll not only talk to us about student loan rates and why the doubling of it will be devastating for students everywhere, but she will also talk about why social insurance programs are important for young Americans, and I look forward to that conversation. But first, we are pleased to welcome to the show, for my very first time, Danny Perry. She is the field director for the Alliance for Retired Americans. Welcome, Danny.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
Listen, Danny, earlier in the year, we talked a lot about the chain CPI and why this would be devastating for Americans everywhere. As many of my listeners know, the president actually offered the chain CPI in his 2014 budget as a part of his extended offer to the Republicans for a grand bargain. And this chain CPI proposal actually sought to cut benefits for seniors, for the disabled, for surviving orphans, for retirees who were federal workers. You name it, federal workers would have been harmed by these proposed cuts. And so, Danny, what is the Alliance for Retired Americans doing to actually protest the proposal?
Great. Well, we are actually very concerned about the chain CPI. See it as a benefit cut to all those groups that you mentioned and folks like you and me that have yet to retire, permanent benefit cut for future retirees and current beneficiaries as well. And so we do believe that this is a real threat. We believe that there is some momentum behind this policy and could potentially be used as a bargaining chip when we move into the fall around the debt ceiling debate and the potential for a grand bargain. And so this summer, we are really seeking to create a lot of grassroots momentum from our state alliances and our coalition partners to send a message to the president and to Congress that Social Security does not contribute to the deficit. It should not be a part of these deficit talks. And the chain CPI is a benefit cut that would harm all the groups that you just talked about. So we're kicking off this summer campaign starting on July 2nd. We're holding a national day of action called the Human Chain Against the Chain CPI. It's going to be a lot of fun. And in about 47 cities across the country, our alliance members and activists from other organizations and our coalition partners at labor and other organizations are going to be out linking arms and forming human chains around members of Congress's offices, federal buildings, and standing in solidarity and saying Social Security did not cause this problem. The chain CPI is unfair and unnecessary. It's the wrong policy solution in this country when so many are facing increased economic security, and Social Security is the only thing that they have that's sound and solid. Their investments are not. So we're kicking off with this National Day of Action, and really the theme is that chain CPI is a cut to Social Security, and some cuts never heal. And so we'll be out there protesting and singing and chanting and having a lot of fun. And also, many members of Congress have been very proactive around the chain CPI. They have signed on to resolutions in both the House and the Senate expressing that the chain CPI is not the way to go. And many of those members of Congress will actually be joining us as a part of those human chains as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
I like that term, the chain CPI, a cut that will never heal. I think that is a very, very good term, and that people need to understand that. So not only are you out there having fun, but you're about raising awareness. Do you get the sense that the American people know how threatening this proposal is and will be for them?
That's a great question. So we have really two goals for these events. One is to educate the public first and foremost, and the second is to really lay the groundwork for a political environment that makes it very difficult for our members of Congress to vote for change CPI. But I think that if you, Maya, were to stop the average person even here in D.C. or in Kansas City or in San Francisco or in Austin, they wouldn't really know what the change CPI is. And this is our opportunity to say to the public and to say to voters that this is a serious issue, and to really stop and think about how Social Security has impacted your life and your family's life. And as we approach Independence Day, which is also a theme, as we approach July 4th, that Social Security has allowed our seniors and disabled to live with independence in this country, and to really talk to the public about what's at stake. And so when you will look at our human chain events across the country, we'll see a lot of Alliance for Retired Americans members, a lot of gray hair out there, but they're also bringing their children and their grandchildren at summer. Kids are off from school. We'll have active workers there that are already saying, I can barely make it as it is. The change CPI, moving into retirement, if somebody were to retire today under the change CPI, they would lose around $6,000 in retirement.
Yeah, that's significant.
And so some of us may say, oh, $6,000, that doesn't sound like a lot over retirement. But if you look in terms of how many seniors in this country, Social Security is their only source of income in retirement, and how it would really negatively impact those seniors, women, et cetera. It's a big deal.
I think what you said about people taking Social Security or not understanding Social Security, I think it's really a matter of us taking it for granted. I mean, here's a program that works as it was intended to, that fills a critical need and a gap in our society, and that works so well that people take it for granted. And so, we're also raising awareness about the importance of Social Security. It sounds like this will be important for that as well. Do you happen to plan to form a chain around the White House?
Well, I'm going to tell you. How we first came up with this idea is the human chain against the change CPI is after the president released his budget, which you noted, included the change CPI. Our Alliance for Retired Americans leadership and advocates across the country were so disappointed and so upset and just couldn't believe it, that folks that they thought in Congress and the White House should be champions of seniors and champions of retirement security were increasingly turning the other way. So we had several of our state alliance leaders in California and New York and Florida call us and say, we think you should do this around the White House. And we thought about it for a little bit and concluded that the legal and logistical issues might be a little difficult. It is something that we are thinking about potentially in the future. However, one of the things that we are doing and working with our partners here in D.C., and including Social Security Works and many of our other partners, is once Congress is back in session on July 8th, we're working with the Congressional Progressive Caucus to hold a press conference outside of Capitol Hill with all of the members of Congress that were included in our human chain events back in their cities and their districts. And we'll be forming a congressional human chain against the change CPI during the week of July 8th with members of Congress who have signed on to various resolutions and various pieces of legislation.
Now, will you get enough of them to circle a tree?
You'd be surprised. We're creating a lot more momentum thanks to the work of organizations, like the Alliance and the National Committee to Protect Social Security and Medicare and Social Security Works. Lots of momentum of members of Congress really standing up and saying, wait a minute, change CPI is a benefit cut. Do I want to be on the record of voting to cut Social Security benefits? And so a lot of members are really thinking legislatively and politically to really move away from this as far as possible. And this is one of the ways to do that. They're recognizing it's bad policy, it's unfair policy, and that there are better ways to go.
I think it's interesting that the Alliance for Retired Americans has not backed down. I don't know if you're aware, but a number of organizations have declared the grand bargain dead, and they seem to think that, threats like the chain CPI are no longer so threatening. And so to keep it at the forefront of the national attention and agenda, and certainly of congressional attention, sounds like it's a very strategic move. Are you seeking to build the cadre of policymakers who are against this proposal in the hopes that it'll never see the light of day?
Absolutely. We have a lot of important pieces of legislation and issues moving. You've just mentioned some of them with the Supreme Court. Immigration is moving. And folks are not really talking about, either in the states, really in D.C. or Congress, about the potential debt ceiling vote that they're going to face in the fall, and all of the maneuvering that's going to be needed to be done around that. We are very much anticipating that there will be some pressure points around the debt ceiling, and that there will be some compromises that will need to be made. It's very difficult to anticipate with this Congress what they're going to do and their timeline. This Congress sometimes just marches to their own tune, and they do things that sometimes you just can't anticipate. So we are anticipating that the chain CPI is going to be used as a bargaining chip, because the White House has pretty much come out and said that. And you can see that in the budget. And so, again, what we want to do is create momentum throughout the summer to raise awareness, to educate the public, to get them to speak out about what a benefit cut would mean to them, and to say to members of Congress, even in a grand bargain, you should not be looking at cutting Social Security.
Right.
Doesn't contribute to the deficit, has its own revenue stream, should not be a part of any of the deficit talks. There are other ways to do it.
So tell our listeners where they can go to learn more information and perhaps sign up to join the chain CPI chains across the country.
Absolutely. You can go to www.retiredamericans, that's with an S.org. On our website, you'll see a tab where you can click on July 2nd, National Day of Action, and you can actually go to a Google map of the country, and you can go to your state and your city and click on events near you. You can actually RSVP online. It's not too late. RSVP online, and once you RSVP, more additional information will be sent to you about an event in your city or state. If you happen to not live near a location where we're having a human chain event, you can still participate in the National Day of Action. We are having a national call-in day to members of Congress to talk to them about Social Security and the chain CPI, and we'll also be doing an online congressional petition as well. So still lots of ways to participate.
Wonderful. Thank you. Danny Perry, field organizer for the Alliance for Retired Americans. Can I have you on again in the future?
Absolutely.
We want to hear how it went.
Oh my gosh, we're going to have lots of great pictures and videos. Thank you so much, Maya.
You are listening to Pivot Point, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. We'll be right back after the break. Okay. Thank you.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle-class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. you can make a difference.
Social Security protects us against loss of income due to retirement, disability, or death. We pay into Social Security throughout our working lives, which is why we must stop Congress or the White House from cutting our earned benefits. Join our powerful national movement to protect Social Security for current and future generations. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us online at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
When I started working decades ago, I didn't know anything about Social Security or Medicare. I was too busy earning a living, buying a house, and raising a family. But life has a way of surprising us. A death in my family and disability first introduced me to Social Security. I'm counting on it when I retire, and thanks to Medicare, I know I'll have the health care I need in retirement. Social Security and Medicare are vital to millions of American families. They also contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy each year. So why are some in Washington threatening benefit cuts to reduce the deficit? It makes no sense. Benefit cuts for the middle class and tax breaks for the wealthy is not fiscal responsibility. It's bad for our economy and even worse for our families. That's why I joined the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Together, we're working to ensure Washington strengthens the programs we paid into throughout our working lives. Call 1-800-966-1935 or visit online at thenationalcommittee.org. We can make a difference.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Welcome back to Pivot Point. I'm your host, Maya Rockeymoore, and it's my pleasure to welcome to the show Emily Crockett. She is the editor of Campus Progress. Welcome, Emily.
Thank you, Maya. Glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what Campus Progress does.
Well, just want to clarify that I'm not speaking for Campus Progress as an organization. I'm also an independent blogger, but Campus Progress does do a lot of campaigns about student loan debt. We are specifically working to fight the impending July 1st interest rate increase on unsubsidized Stafford loans.
So I think this story has been underreported, that the student loan rates are expected to double
on
Monday?
Yes, they are. Monday, July 1st.
Now, how did that happen?
Well, it happened because Congress had other things to do and other priorities. And essentially, they did not act. And last year, we actually had the same exact fight last year over Stafford loans. And so just to clarify, this is federal loans that are unsubsidized. So you have subsidized, unsubsidized. The interest rate for the unsubsidized, so if you need a little bit of help, if you're lower income, then that's 3.4%. They would double to 6.8% for those who are taking out new loans or those who, even some who already have taken out some loans. So this would be about $1,000 on average over the life of the loan extra for a lot of these students. Mm-hmm. It's I think a lot of people don't understand the massive amount of money that students pay for interest, right? There are certain cases, especially with private loans, as opposed to federal loans, where the interest rates are higher, where over the lifetime of your loan, depending on how long you're taking, you could be paying double or triple the amount of your principal ultimately. The amount that students are paying per month on their student loan bills is about as much as a mortgage payment. It's about, or as much as a car payment. Whatever it is a massive, massive bill, a massive drain on student resources, and just an incredibly damaging drain on our young people.
So break it down for us, because I think that most of us are confused about, we heard several years ago the president fighting to federalize the way that student loans are administered, so that the federal government goes back to administering certain student loans. Is the Stafford a part of that?
Well, so the Stafford is an existing program. That is just a federal loan that students can take out, and if it's subsidized, then you have a lower interest rate. If it's not, then you have that 6.8% rate. But so this affects only federal loans. It's an existing program, and it'll affect students going forward. But the hashtag is "Don't double my rate," right? And even if you're a student who it won't affect you, it is going to affect the next generation of students who are coming up. And what I love seeing is the solidarity of current students, even if they don't have Stafford loans, even if they are not going to be, they're not going to see their bill go up, there is still substantial solidarity with those who will see their rates go up. And it's more than just individual students. It's a system-wide problem. We have over $1 trillion of student loan debt. It has surpassed credit card debt. It is the largest form of consumer debt aside from mortgages that Americans
And it can't
had.
be discharged.
Nope.
Which makes it very different from other kinds of debt.
Yeah, it's really a remarkable, there was an article in Salon recently called, it was titled something like "Your Student Loan Debt Isn't Actually a Loan." It's basically, it sounds hyperbolic, but it's kind of a form of indentured servitude. Because here you go, you take out this loan, and one way or another, it will be paid back. You go into bankruptcy, too bad, you're going to pay it back.
What if you die?
You could die, you pay it back. There are students who die in their 20s, and their parents are still on the hook for their student loan bills.
Wow.
Yup. So Donald Trump could rack up billions of dollars in gambling debt, get it discharged in bankruptcy, he'd be fine. Students cannot do the same thing. They do not have the same protections. So there are several different campaigns in the works on student loans.
Before we go there, let's talk
Sure.
about the politics of it.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
I mean, there are a number of fixes out there being proposed for this.
Yes, there are. So there are a number of bills with various probabilities of passing or not passing. Some have already been shot down. There's a thing called a variable model and a fixed model. If you have variable interest rates, then they fluctuate over time, right? So right now, if interest rates are at 2%, then you get a loan at 2%. And if the interest rates go up to 6 next year, then it'll be 6 next year. That's the Republican proposal. That's not good.
That's the understatement of the year.
Right, because students are not, if it's completely variable interest rates, students are not able to plan, to plan financially. They might be paying $200 one month and $400 the next. They have no idea. And so that was the Republican proposal.
And to me, it sounds like the mortgages that had variable interest rates that were unsustainable for many families. So,
Right, exactly. And mortgages, you can refinance your mortgage. You can, the average rate for mortgages right now is like 3.6%, something like that. If you could refinance your student loans down to 3 or 4%, it would save potentially hundreds of dollars a month. And that's actually Senator Gillibrand of New York. She has a refinancing proposal to that end that would, I believe, require federal loans to allow loans to be refinanced down to about 4%.
Okay.
And of course, then there's the distinction between federal and private. There are a lot of complicated factors here. Congress is sort of more able to control rates on federal loans and policies of federal loans. When you involve the private market, it gets a little bit stickier. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB, that's the bureau that Elizabeth Warren would have headed if Republicans hadn't pushed her out. And then, LOL, she's in the Senate instead and has much more power. Ha! Right. And the CFPB is still alive. So
the other part of this is not only are there a variety of proposals, and the Obama administration has one as well. Any of them the best to you?
Well, so Obama's proposal is okay. It's so we have like a variable model, but that's variable only for the beginning. So if you finance at a time when you have low mortgage rates,
right,
then you can have that rate for the duration of your loan. It also expands pay as you earn, and it sets the interest rate to the 10-year Treasury note plus 0.93%. So if you set your interest rates to something like the Treasury note or something like the 91-day T-bill, which is 0.5%, those are really low rates, like especially right now.
Right now.
Yeah. Right now.
But everybody knows they're going back up.
Sure. Yeah, but probably not that much. And the other thing with Obama's proposal is it has a cap. So that's helpful. But actually, no, sorry. That was a mistake. The Obama proposal does not have a cap, so that's the problem there, is that you could you can save students money if they are able to finance at a lower rate and then keep it there and then know what their rate's going to be. But if you don't cap it, then if interest rates go up to 6 or 8%, then that's a whole other story.
Right.
So the
I mean, we don't have to go through all the bills, but I just wanted to get a sense of that there are a number of policymakers out there that are trying to play in this space to create a fix. And some of the fixes are frankly not fixes. They're actually a way to basically stick it to students and basically twist the knife.
Kind of, sort of. So like I like thinking of it this way. When we talk about debt, we talk a lot about nautical metaphors, right? We talk about being underwater or drowning in debt. I see the student loan crisis, because it is a crisis, as being stuck in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean on a leaking boat and fighting over interest rates like this, or these narrow fights over not even lowering interest rates, not even refinancing, because refinancing helps current borrowers as well as future borrowers. Not even like really good interest rates, but just fighting over Stafford is like trying to bail out this rowboat in the middle of the Atlantic. You have to. If you don't, you're going to drown. But meanwhile, you're stuck in the middle of the Atlantic. And
a storm is coming.
And a storm is coming. And the Republicans say that you should save your signal flares to fight off the sharks instead of call for help. Instead, we need to call, for help. Because
and the last part of the political thing that I want to actually address with you is the fact that to the extent that these federal loans are actually generating a profit for the feds.
They sure are. Yeah, about $50 billion a year.
And so in a way, the students are directly subsidizing the federal deficit and debt.
Yeah, funny story. That's happening. It is, and Elizabeth Warren, who I haven't mentioned yet, has definitely been hitting this hard. She has a proposal herself that's, I think, even better than Gillibrand's, which of course means it has less potential of actually passing. But it would tie interest rates to the Federal Reserve discount rate, which is less than 1%. And that would be tremendous savings for students. Now, again, all of these proposals had limitations. This would only last a year. But she calls it the Bank on Students Act. It's like, let's give students the same rates we give banks. You talk about economic stimulus. Let's talk about putting more money in the hands of consumers who actually need it.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, that's great. So you were talking about the campaigns. What's going on in the field?
Well, gosh, the field, if you're looking at student organizers, if you're looking at, especially the sort of progressive and radical young people, there's a lot of really interesting stuff happening on the ground. You have the bigger organizations like Campus Progress who are pushing for a much more expansive look at interest rates, which is very sensible, which is very necessary. So like refinancing, for example. You can refinance your home, or you can refinance your mortgage. So, ergo, you should be able to refinance your student debt. And that's so Gillibrand's bill is an example of that, where you can take, even if, I've talked to some people who have debt in their 60s, and they, has accrued like $40,000 of fees and interest over the years. And if you refinance, then you can just kind of knock all that off, start from scratch, get back to your 10K principal or whatever it is, and start with a more sensible rate. Now, there are those in the field who are calling for a much broader discussion about student loans, not just loans, but college affordability, because we're on kind of an unsustainable track here. College has increased in cost 12,000%-ish in the last 30 years.
12,000%.
Yeah, I think just, or 11,000, sorry, not 12,000, I'm sorry, 1,200, 1,100, something like that. But it's a lot. It's a substantial increase. So you have students 18-year-olds who, are not financially savvy, even if their parents are financially savvy, their parents went to school at an era when a summer job could legitimately pay for your college. That is no longer the case. You're entering an era where college is becoming increasingly an inherited wealth, where if your family's rich, you're fine. If not, well, you have to struggle, and you can get grants, you can get scholarships, but they probably won't cover your costs.
So tell us what this means. This show typically focuses on issues like Social Security and Medicare, issues of aging. But to the extent that younger people, as they graduate from school and then go into the workforce, are basically using a lot of their disposable income to service debt. What does that mean about their likelihood of increased reliance on social insurance programs in retirement?
Gosh, yeah, tremendous. It has a tremendous impact. So first of all, you have fewer students who are taking out mortgages because they're spending as much on their loans as they might on a mortgage. You have fewer students getting cars, so there's less economic stimulus from that stuff. And then, forget saving for retirement. I talked to somebody who's with the American Federation for Teachers, and he's got a good union job, but he's still paying off his own loans. He can't even save for his kids' education. So, and then you can imagine what that's doing for retirement, for the kids' retirement. So it's becoming a generational problem. And that is a huge problem. And I talked to somebody else who, is just turned 50, is a community college professor, and he says he has held off on having a family and kids in part. He's lost relationships because of his debt. And he expects that he will have his you can have your Social Security checks garnished, by the way.
That's right.
Yep, to pay your student loans. Yep. And it can and does happen. You can appeal it, but a lot of there's a lack of information that's a problem here. A lot of people just don't know what channels they should go through to get some relief on these issues.
So where can people go to get more information, not only about Campus Progress, but also about getting information about this issue?
So Campus Progress is campusprogress.org. We have a massive, amazing conference coming up on July 17th called Make Progress, and we have a number of partners who are with us on that. And Elizabeth Warren is speaking there. Yay, that's going to be really, really exciting. And more information about, so if you are in debt trouble, you can appeal, if you're having your wages garnished, you can appeal to the Department of Education. There are a number of great organizations on the ground like Occupy Student Debt. They're collecting stories. They're doing actions. There's a forstudentpower.org is this guy I know who's traveling around the country and getting people's stories and helping organize. There are a lot of really impressive grassroots campaigns happening, from students around the country who are sick of debt, who are sick of being held back from their futures. And it's a challenging time, but an exciting time.
So thank you, Emily Crockett.
Thank you very much.
Very much for having you. I look forward to having you on again in the future.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Yep. You're listening to Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore, sponsored by the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Stay with us after the break. We will be talking to Lori Young about the Supreme Court and the Defense of Marriage Act.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
When I started working decades ago, I didn't know anything about Social Security or Medicare. I was too busy earning a living, buying a house, and raising a family. But life has a way of surprising us. A death in my family and disability first introduced me to Social Security. I'm counting on it when I retire. And thanks to Medicare, I know I'll have the health care I need in retirement. Social Security and Medicare are vital to millions of American families. They also contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy each year. So why are some in Washington threatening benefit cuts to reduce the deficit? It makes no sense. Benefit cuts for the middle class and tax breaks for the wealthy is not fiscal responsibility. It's bad for our economy and even worse for our families. That's why I joined the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Together, we're working to ensure Washington strengthens the programs we paid into throughout our working lives. Call 1-800-966-1935 or visit online at thenationalcommittee.org. We can make a difference.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
Social Security protects us against loss of income due to retirement, disability, or death. We pay into Social Security throughout our working lives, which is why we must stop Congress or the White House from cutting our earned benefits. Join our powerful national movement to protect Social Security for current and future generations. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us online at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
When I started working decades ago, I didn't know anything about Social Security or Medicare. I was too busy earning a living, buying a house, and raising a family. But life has a way of surprising us. A death in my family and disability first introduced me to Social Security. I'm counting on it when I retire. And thanks to Medicare, I know I'll have the health care I need in retirement. Social Security and Medicare are vital to millions of American families. They also contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy each year. So why are some in Washington threatening benefit cuts to reduce the deficit? It makes no sense. Benefit cuts for the middle class and tax breaks for the wealthy is not fiscal responsibility. It's bad for our economy and even worse for our families. That's why I joined the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Together, we're working to ensure Washington strengthens the programs we paid into throughout our working lives. Call 1-800-966-1935 or visit online at thenationalcommittee.org. We can make a difference.
Welcome back to Pivot Point. I am your host, Maya Rockeymoore, and it is my pleasure to welcome to the show the outgoing Director of Aging and Economic Security at the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force. Welcome, Lori Young.
Hi, Maya. How are you?
I'm well, Lori. Lori, listen, I think that people need to understand why you are outgoing.
Well, I am very, very lucky and very fortunate that I've been able to retire.
Wow.
And it came through a lot of hard planning and a lot of sacrifice. And I'm actually going to be semi-retired. I'm one of those people who, because of the economy, will be working a few hours each week.
Congratulations, Lori. I know that it was hard-earned, and there are, a number of similarly situated people who have, for whatever reason, because of the economy or because of, lifelong low wages, are finding it difficult to retire in America. And you've actually focused your work on this, have you not?
I have. I've spent most of my career in the last 15 years working on the problems of aging and retirement and economic insecurity.
So, Lori, this past week, the Supreme Court struck down the Defense of Marriage Act. First of all, this has been a historic week in terms of the Supreme Court decisions, but that decision in particular was historic. For what reason?
Well, I mean, it is a decision that is on par with Roe v. Wade in terms of magnitude and implications. It is historic in saying that people are equal and that the federal government will not allow discrimination between heterosexual marriage and same-sex marriage. It is really, really monumental. And I have to say, after the ruling on the Voting Rights Act the day before, I was very frightened. And I was sick in my stomach about the Voting Rights Act. But the ruling on DOMA was the right ruling. I mean, it was on the face of it. There was a marriage that had been recognized in the state of New York. DOMA had been ruled unconstitutional in 2 previous federal courts and was now worked its way up to the Supreme Court. And it would have been astonishing to me if there had been any other outcome, but you never can tell.
You never know, especially with the Supreme Court.
Exactly.
And so what does this mean in the States? Does it mean that anybody across the country, same-sex couples, can get married anywhere?
No.
Right.
It doesn't mean that. It means that in what is now 13 states, now that Californians started marrying on Friday, in 13 states in the country, in the District of Columbia, same-sex couples can get married. What the DOMA ruling means is that in those 13 states and the District of Columbia, those marriages will be recognized by the federal government.
And when in the implications, why is the federal government significant in this instance?
It's significant because there are 1,138 benefits built into the recognition of marriage by the federal government that heretofore same-sex couples who were legally married in 12 states and the district were denied. And so it goes everything from tax code to inheritance rights to health benefits not being taxed differently for spouses because the federal government didn't recognize it. It is telling that on Friday, the Office of Personnel Management sent out a memo to all of the federal offices and affecting all federal employees that they can start now signing up for benefits for people who work for the federal government.
So this is very complex and complicated. I know that we here at this show focus a lot on Social Security and Medicare. And so that means in the 13 states in the District of Columbia, same-sex married couples can actually receive Social Security and Medicare benefits, correct?
That's absolutely right.
What if they actually move to another state?
Well, you just walked right into my life situation. During the 4 months in 2008 when marriage was legal in California, my spouse and I got married. Actually, you'll appreciate this, Maya, on August 14th, which is the anniversary of Social Security.
That's right.
But we live in the state of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so because right now benefits are actually, many benefits, not all, are decided on where you live, the domicile, we will not be available to take advantage of those same kind of benefits that people who live across the river in Washington, D.C. will have full advantage of.
But can't you file a lawsuit, Lori?
Well, we can, and people are starting to move in that area in the Commonwealth of Virginia to have the constitutional amendment that was passed ruled unconstitutional.
Yeah. So in terms of Social Security, it's just a matter of if you live in those 13 states in the District of Columbia, just going to the Social Security office and signing up.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. So with regards to that, I guess my question for you, Lori, in terms of your personal situation, why not just move across the Potomac?
Well, it's complicated.
Yeah.
We have a daughter who is in college in Virginia. It's a state school. She has lived all of her 20 years in the same house. It would mean picking up and moving from her home. She's expressed a strong desire for us not to do that. So it's like almost every couple, everybody's situation is unique.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's complicated and it's a hard decision. I just wish the Commonwealth of Virginia was, we live in Arlington County, which is in fact very progressive.
Mm-hmm.
So we forget sometimes that this is really the Commonwealth.
Right.
Each individual story is different and complicated by the realities of their lives.
So what do you make of the backlash from the conservative right that, we've got a number of organizations throughout southern states and some not in southern states who are dedicated to actually fighting the Supreme Court's decisions state by state and making sure that those benefits and that legal recognition doesn't happen in their states?
I've never understood completely why it is that the very hard right and some kinds of religious, organizations find same-sex marriage so threatening. I recall the time that Barney Frank, when he was a member of Congress, stood on the floor in the House and said, "Why do you care if I get married? What harm does my marriage do to you?" And no one has ever really successfully answered that question to my satisfaction. I think it's reactive. I think people have been holding on to belief systems that have been near and dear to them. And if they start questioning some of those beliefs, it may start unraveling all kinds of other questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think that we have proven successfully that same-sex couples raise children well, revere the institution of marriage, but we revere the institution of civil marriage. It is not this unconstitutional finding in terms of DOMA does not compel religions or religious institutions to do anything different than they currently are.
Mm-hmm. Lori, some people are interpreting this as not only a historic shift, but a dramatic shift, that it happened in a relatively short amount of time, given the span of recent American history around this issue, and how just a short time ago it was inconceivable that Americans would actually recognize same-sex marriage, much less accept same-sex couples.
That's true. I mean, I don't know any kind of major cultural shift like this that has moved as quickly as this issue has. Frankly, I never thought that this would happen in my lifetime.
And how did you feel last week?
I was overwhelmed. I felt proud. I felt whole. I felt complete as an American citizen, and just so incredibly happy.
And I'm sure that colleagues in the communities across the country felt the same way. In fact, here in the District of Columbia, there were celebrations across the city, certainly up and down 14th Street and in various parts of the city. It was just amazing to see.
It's true. The National Gay and Lesbian Task Force was part of a number of organizations that were in a coalition called United for Marriage, and around 5:30 p.m. that day, there was a celebration on Freedom Plaza.
Mm-hmm.
And boy, if the word doesn't hold up right there, I don't know what does. But there was a coming together of people who've been working for this for decades.
So can you tell us? Oh, go ahead. Mm-hmm.
I was just saying the celebration was phenomenal.
Can you tell us and our listening audience, because the fight is really not over, where they can go to join in the effort in the states that still have an uphill battle?
Most states have an equality organization. I would suggest that, like, for people, Illinois is probably going to be looking at the question of marriage very soon. There is a statewide organization called Equality Illinois. So that's very similar in a lot of other states. National organizations are going to continue to work on this at a state level. So the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, which builds power from the ground up to take action and create change, will be working in states across the country to help move forward to dismantle the kind of statewide DOMAs and constitutional amendments. and the Freedom to Marry will continue doing their work. But there's pretty much going to be a continued effort until we have the freedom to marry and equality of our relationships in all 50 states.
I did want to ask you, did you keep up with the immigration reform debate?
I have.
And the intersection of this issue with immigration reform, it seemed to be something that undercut the argument of gay and lesbian couples.
Well, there was a bill that has been introduced forever called UAFA, Uniting American Families Act, and that was about binational couples. And there was a big argument through as the immigration reform passed through the Senate as to whether that bill allowing same-sex couples to sponsor their binational partner for immigration would be included in comprehensive immigration reform. It was not. And it was not because they were afraid that they would lose support from the Republican side in truly getting a binational bill passed. The remarkable thing, again, about the finding of the Supreme Court on Wednesday is that we've now seen binational couples who are married in those 13 states and the District of Columbia being able to sponsor their same-sex partner for immigration, the same way that heterosexual couples can.
Lori, I think it's congratulations are in front, and a number of congratulations are in order on a number of fronts. So, do you have any plans for celebration?
Oh, I do. I'm celebrating my retirement. We went out for breakfast this morning. That was my retirement celebration. August 14th, we'll be celebrating the 5th year of our marriage in California.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It's the 30th anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Of our relationship.
That's great. So congratulations.
Thank you. We have many celebrations coming up.
Many, many celebrations. So thank you, Lori Young, the outgoing Director of Aging and Economic Security at the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, and also, in the interest of full disclosure, a friend of mine. So thank you, Lori.
Oh, thanks, Maya. Thanks for having me on.
And thanks to my listening audience for joining me for yet another edition of Pivot Point with Maya Rockeymoore. Thanks to our sponsor, the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare, an excellent organization on the forefront of this issue. In fact, they put out a report on same-sex couples and Social Security not too long ago. Check it out on their website, ncpssm.org. And thanks to the production team here at weactradio.com. Certainly Peter James Callahan, or Rich Webster, and the entire team of folks who support this effort. And last but not least, I invite everyone to join us every Sunday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time on weactradio.com or 1480 a.m. in the Washington, D.C. area. Listen to our show and check it out. Until next time, America.
When I started working decades ago, I didn't know anything about Social Security or Medicare. I was too busy earning a living, buying a house, and raising a family. But life has a way of surprising us. A death in my family and disability first introduced me to Social Security. I'm counting on it when I retire. And thanks to Medicare, I know I'll have the health care I need in retirement. Social Security and Medicare are vital to millions of American families. They also contribute hundreds of billions of dollars to our economy each year. So why are some in Washington threatening cutting benefit cuts to reduce the deficit. It makes no sense. Benefit cuts for the middle class and tax breaks for the wealthy is not fiscal responsibility. It's bad for our economy and even worse for our families. That's why I joined the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare. Together, we're working to ensure Washington strengthens the programs we paid into throughout our working lives. Call 1-800-966-1935 or visit online at thenationalcommittee.org. We can make a difference.
Americans of all ages and political parties agree they do not support cutting Social Security and Medicare benefits to pay for Washington's fiscal failures. Putting millions of middle class and poor Americans and their families at risk in the name of deficit reduction is not fiscal responsibility. Social Security and Medicare strengthen our economy and our families. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
Social Security protects us against loss of income due to retirement, disability, or death. We pay into Social Security throughout our working lives, which is why we must stop Congress or the White House from cutting our earned benefits. Join our powerful national movement to protect Social Security for current and future generations. Call the National Committee to Preserve Social Security and Medicare at 1-800-966-1935 or visit us online at thenationalcommittee.org. You can make a difference.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Visit us online at weactradio.com.
Well, here's the top 20 bills on the Hill from Congress and from our friends at popvox.com. That's popvox.com. The PopVox Weekly Bill Roundup for the week of February 1st through 7th. Well, it looks like this week we get a break. Americans are not being held by gunpoint, meaning not all bills this week are gun-related. However, with the new news this week that our government can use drones against us, we might be safer in our streets because the new